Welcome to the Generational Exchange. Ever wondered what happens when you bring together four seasons per season happens? Let's try that again. Three, two,
Take two.
one. Take two. Welcome to the Generational Exchange. Ever wondered what happens when you bring together four seasoned professionals, each with their own unique generational lens on the business world? Well, you've come to the right place. Join our hosts in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s as we tackle the big questions, share decades of combined experience, and unravel the threads of today's professional challenges. Plus, in select episodes, we'll be joined by insightful guest panelists, like today, to offer even deeper dives into specific topics. Expect clever takes, engaging debates, a healthy dose of humor, and a few stories proving wisdom is ageless. Today, our topic is bridging worlds through purposeful leadership. What is it, how to get it, and why it's important? So, with that, let's start the exchange. On today's show, we are thrilled to have our special guest, Mai Moore, joining us today.
So, Mai, why don't you maybe just share a couple of other little anecdotes here about yourself to
Sure.
Chris and Rhett. And again, we're excited to have you on today. And again, you're in
Yes, sir.
Brooklyn right now, right? Okay. Well, all three of us spent that time in Dumbo for a few years, so we can definitely relate. But how's everything in the city today?
Um, I love it. I love it. I'm in Williamsburg, so it's super calm here. I don't know how it is in the city right now, but every day's a new day.
Mm.
So, yeah, I can jump in here.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you, Rhett. I didn't say hello to you. Yeah,
No
thank
worries.
you.
Nice to meet you as well.
So great to be here. Thanks for having me, you guys. Just a little bit about myself, if you want me to get into it. My name is Mai Moore, and I'm a human. I call myself hashtag almost social impact. I'm really here to help people see more clearly so that they can lead better. And ultimately, my vision is really here to create a more equitable, connected, and empowered world. And probably you guys have seen the bio, but I do have a lot of work, a lot of experience starting up different startups. And one of them was back in 2013 is EYEJ, Empowering Youth Exploring Justice, which is a nonprofit empowering young advocates for change. So I did that for about 10 years, serving literally over 2,000 underserved youth, and with the help of 1,400 very diverse adults, really teaching young people how do you create change beyond the idea, how do you actually implement it. And before EYEJ, I was in tech for like well over 20 years and helped two companies go public. So that's kind of my background. And then after EYEJ, really I became a chief. I don't know if you're familiar with Chief, but it's one of the largest executive women networks, and was really paying attention to what was happening with women. And this was what, 3 years ago, and all the talk about the Great Resignation and pay gap issues, DEI issues, burnout, all that was happening. And so I started a coalition with 34 other chiefs, where we started doing these speaker series, because I felt like we had set up young people for failure, basically, and meaning that I wanted to pull the authentic storytelling out of these very diverse women, because that's what young people trust, is that authenticity, sharing stories of adversity, because every single woman, I don't care what background they are, has some kind of story to share. And being a glutton for punishment, I was like, well, there's a business here. And so created Boss Man, which is all about bridging the intergenerational gap for the future of work. Very, very focused on intergenerational leadership. Served, 2,000 adults there, and over 400. It's more now, but very different kind of Gen Z than EYEJ. And in the last several months, I've been really focusing more on awakening awareness, and doing more public speaking, because what I realized moving back to New York is, I was asking myself, like, what the heck have I been doing these last 13 years? And really what I realized is that I was awakening awareness. I was helping people really understand issues, what certain demographic of people are facing. And so that's what awakening awareness is about. And what I also realized is that I was building leaders. That's what I was doing, and all different kind of leaders. And so that's where that, helping people see more clearly so that they can lead better, because we are in a state of a new era of leadership, and, new demands, definitely a urgent desire for better leadership across the board. And that's really what I've been doing. So, yeah. And
What's that?
Only that, huh? That's
I
quite
was
I'm
going to say
like,
that's
no,
it.
that's not enough. I have more to do. So, yeah, I'm. Oh, thank you.
Well, welcome. No, I was just
Thank
going to say
you. Thanks for
welcome.
having me. Appreciate it. Tell me about you guys. I met
Yeah.
Mark.
So our podcast, and am I still breaking up? I'm sorry, I don't mean to step on you. Am I still breaking up, or are we okay?
Um,
All right.
I think you're coming through clearly now for
Okay.
me, at
All right.
least.
Very good. So just a little bit about the podcast. We call ourselves a generational exchange. There's usually four of us, as we talked about. Jeremy is on assignment today, but I represent someone in my 50s. Rhett represents someone in his 30s, and Mark represents somebody. Is it still 60s, Mark? Are you still in the 60s?
Yeah, I'm still in
Yeah.
the
Okay.
60s.
All right.
Thank
Very
you.
good. And then Jeremy is our representative of the 40s, and we launched this about a year ago as a way to kind of bridge the gap, kind of like you were talking about ways of communicating. We were all talking to each other. We've all worked for and with each other, and really wanted to have dialogues about interesting business topics, and meet interesting people like you, and have conversations, and hopefully show that there is more
yeah.
commonality than differences, regardless of the generations. And I know we're going to get into that about Gen Z here in a little bit, but talk about you started talking about it here, but talk about a little bit more about what you're working on. How are you kind of driving some of that change through Boss Me In and some of your other organizations that you're working on?
Okay. So I'm definitely want to explain. I'm a person of action. I have seen far too many times, and I'm sure you guys have too, of how much talk there is, whether it's in corporate or just simply in society. And what I have really witnessed in my experience is how that actually hurts us. Not only hurts us, but takes us backwards. And so I think we see a lot of that in society right now, right? And so, with Boss Me In, we there's several products that we have, including a speaker series, including a co-mentoring program, including executive coaching program, think tanks, workshops, really connected to drive impact, to create change, right? To share the knowledge, but also have intimate conversations so that we can be honest and vulnerable and really talk about pain points, and then at the same time empowering young leaders. And so everything kind of connects. And something else that I learned too is when we were doing originally the speaker series to start, talking is great. It's a first start. The storytelling is great. But if we don't follow up, it's like going to a conference. If we don't take that next step into action, it means nothing. I don't care what industry you're in, right? And so I'm very, like a real superpower of mine is how do we actually take the information from those, that learning, whatever happened, the speaker series, or if it's a conversation, and move it into action, into something tangible. Something, as I talked about, I'm really focused on, because Boss Me and we're bringing on 2 co-founders and working on a Thrive Together Summit, which is all about intergenerational leadership. But as I mentioned, I'm really focused on really the awakening awareness right now. And I just did, as an example, an event with a very well-known Gen Z, Natalie Neptune. But I wanted to teach her, not only was it about intergenerational leadership, but just this concept of how do you actually take the conversation into action. And so it was kind of like Boss Means, all of Boss Means kind of products in like one night, in an hour and a half, where people didn't know each other. We had Gen Z founders in New York City. We had chiefs come to this. And there's a method to the madness of how we got into action. And so many outcomes came from that meeting. There's a post on my LinkedIn, and I think they put it in my newsletter yesterday. But people who are getting, new connections, funding opportunities, practicing their pitch. They got mentors. I feel like we're in that society now, is how do we do things with more ease, but I believe that we're in an impact economy. How do we get into that impact and teach people how to get into that impact? I feel like a lot of people are frustrated. You guys have a lot of experience in corporate and different industries. We spend months and years and sometimes never any kind of action or outcome comes out of that. And to me, the biggest respect is not wasting people's time. And I think in this society, it's so overwhelming, so much going on. How can we create impact in a faster way?
Talk a little bit more about how you're driving it, especially with Gen Z. I saw another podcast that you were on. I think it was called Boss Track, and it was really interesting to hear the dialogue on that. But is that your main focus is with Gen Zers is trying to build the bridge? Because, as a generational podcast, we find that very interesting. We're actually thinking about bringing a Gen Zer onto our show. But where are you seeing that there's like with what we were talking about, are there more
Sure.
similarities? What is it that people should understand when they're talking about Gen Zers so that we get that impact and we're bi-directionally speaking the same language?
That's a big question. So what I about 30 questions in one, but what I have learned through these years is that the work needs to be done everywhere. The problem is not Gen Z. The problem is in leadership, really. And the truth is that even with EYEJ, this awakening awareness thing that I'm focusing on now, even with EYEJ, the work truly, even though the work was for the young people, it was never about the young people. It was really about the adults. And it's the same thing with Boss Me In, is that we have to do the work. I don't care if you're Gen Z, I don't care if you're Gen X, I don't care if you're a boomer. We have to do the work in self-leadership first, face ourselves, get to know ourselves, heal, whatever it is, before we step into that kind of role, in my opinion, in this day and age. And to answer your question, it's complex. You've got 5 generations in the workforce. In 5 years, 70% of our workforce is going to be millennials and Gen Z. Have we set them up for success? Absolutely not, in my opinion. And it's hard. I don't sit there and blame different groups because we have a lot of pressures as executives, a lot of responsibilities. Sometimes, especially if you are underserved or a minority like me or what, I'm not trying to complain here, but you're underfunded, you're under resourced, and so I don't have sometimes the middle management to be the between the connector, because young people, I don't care what year it is, it's natural. Young people need to be handheld, to be trained. They need empowerment. They need support. It doesn't matter if it's 2025 or 1995. Doesn't matter, right? So I think what I'm trying to say is there's more pressure. So I don't entirely blame executives, but I do believe that we are not doing the work to be able to communicate and bridge and work together effectively with Gen Z. And let's be honest, again, I've witnessed a lot, guys, and I see even with Gen Z, there's a lot of problems. So what I'm trying to say here is there's not one group that has all the answers. And that's why we need to come together. And that's why this podcast is so powerful and just a great demonstration. But come together to have these conversations and to respect each other, right? In this bi-directional way. Because the truth is that Gen Z have been watching us. And they see all the 800 million mistakes we have made. And so they do have solutions. They do have recommendations. And honestly, sometimes they are pretty darn good and sometimes better than an executive with 30 years experience. So, but there's at the same time, trust me, I know the issues too with Gen Z too. And in my opinion, there needs to also be respect for the executive who has that 30 years experience and has, made a lot of mistakes, because when you make mistakes, you learn hopefully you learn from them, you grow, you have seen a lot, you have access to resources, you have connections. So there is positive on all ends. And I love millennials. Honestly, millennials are some of my favorite. Don't tell any of my team this. Honestly, because to me, you're a bridge. You're a connector, right? And you have honestly set up a lot of this stuff for the Gen Z, but you have now a little bit more experience working with executives, knowing how to, converse with us. understanding a little bit more responsibility that we have. And so being that bridge is vital. And I really hope that corporations do not cut out the middlemen, the middle managers, because they are vital. It's just like society, the middle class, vital to keep things operating and moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mark, you had a question?
Yeah, I was just going to say, Mai, I think, you hit a lot of core topics right there. And I think, to me, part of it is how do you, again, do that bridge? Because number one, the more we hear, right, the more we listen to what everyone is saying, how can we create that recipe? And I know from, my work with Chris and Jeremy and Rhett and, in my own, leadership development and coaching business, we talk a lot about recipes, that everyone's bringing something. And I think the other element is in a lot of my work with my alma mater and all the either A students or recently, graduated students in that Gen Z category, to me, it's like, I need to hear what you have to say. I need to hear your perspective because you're also looking at it through a lens that I candidly don't have anymore. And so I'm wondering, where do you draw that line though between understanding and saying, let's be brutally honest. What are the elephants in the room? And if we can get those elephants in the room open, then from there, we've got a much better way to move forward.
I can bring the elephants in the room. Where do we start? There's a lot of elephants. So I would start with, I think, in my opinion, there's a big problem with ego on all ends. And I feel like, like I said, I've served a lot of different kind of Gen Z, and I hate to say it this way, but the more educated or more privileged Gen Z, like I said, have been watching us and following our ways. Of course, they have different demands in society, and it honestly makes me quite sad when I see so many young people who are worried at 22, 23 years old about their reputation, right? When I was 22, I was like, what? You're just trying to figure it out, right? Or just having a false ego out of insecurity. And again, I don't blame them because that came from us. And in my opinion, it came from capitalism and how we were taught how to be. What I'm trying to say here is executives, we have to get a little more humble. And of course, it's important to celebrate accomplishments and be proud of yourself. But how do we do that in a healthier way versus this, sometimes you're seeing this entitlement and this ego that is incredibly toxic. And you see it trickle down the path. I think that's an elephant in the room. You want me to keep going? I can bring.
No, I agree with you. I think vulnerability is number one, is that no one's immune from being either wrong or, like you said, from the experiences. I wish I had $1 for every time I made a mistake working with, teams. And even in my later years, Rhett can probably attest to it. There were probably a couple times where I regretted, things that I said, okay, I think this is the best way to do it, but didn't really look at it through that full 360 view, from that perspective. So I think, again, as people can better understand that everyone has a contribution, you may not always get your way, but yet at the same time, there are little bits and pieces that can all be melded together.
And I think, Mark, you just said a key point about, I think as leaders, we have to communicate more that we don't have all the answers. And I think we have been taught actually very opposite, that we must have all the answers, right? Because if you didn't, you lose your job or something, blah, blah, blah. We were under pressure to have the answers. But young people, and Rhett, you would know obviously more than me on this, but young people are looking for more humanized leadership. And because if we are sitting here displaying all the time, we have all the answers, then they think they have to have all the answers too, right? And that's not realistic. It's not.
Right. Yeah, and it ironically, it hurts the learning process in general, right? Because when you're moving forward and pushing forward as if you have all the answers, you don't tend to ask a lot of questions because you're expecting the answer to be back, well, you should know that, or that's in your job description. I'm surprised
Right.
you're asking that question. Anything like that. I guess to that point of kind of struggling to build leadership or find leadership, and us being responsible with it. I wonder if, do you feel like the vast abundance or overwhelming amount of information out there, and like quote unquote leadership coaching, and just can be detrimental sometimes? Like, I think about if I have a to-do list that has 70 things on it, I'm like, where do I start? Whereas when you were, 40 years ago or whatever, when you were starting, it's like, well,
Yeah.
you learn from your boss and they learn from their boss, and there was no, you have 10 leadership coaches or gurus telling you how you should do
That's
it.
an interesting question. We are obviously in a world that is very overwhelming. Information going left, right, center, social media, what's happening in the world. I
Right.
don't know if we're going to get away from that for a while. And I think there's a different perspective I want to bring to the table here. Is that a lot of so let me just all I can be is honest. So I'm half Japanese, I'm half Caucasian. I have a very old school American big family, 5 uncles, 1 aunt, all Caucasian, all successful, had a straight path. They worked hard. But what I want to say is that underserved youth, minorities, people like me, we are used to on a daily basis dealing with 80 to 100 things already. So we are already trained somewhat in this way just from life, right? Whether trying to survive, or the worry about, someone dying, or someone has health issues here, but I have to, I have to get money, rent for my parent here, or I'm hungry, or I didn't study for this test, or I'm late to school. These are all just simply problems happening all in the same 30 seconds, right? So these are different kind of experiences happening. And so I think that's something to think about. And back to your question, Rhett, I don't think it's going to get less overwhelming for a while. And so the answer is, do we need to learn how to multitask? I think is your question. Probably. But also need to learn how to do it in a very healthy way, right? Is there space that we need to take for ourselves to get away from the electronics, or get away from the news for a bit, or making sure that we are centered and we are healthy in order to perform well, right? I think there's a lot of that happening too.
Yeah.
Mai, how do you think the Gen Zers can help simplify things? I mean, like everything else, I do paralysis by analysis. That's my analytical coming out all the time. But how can people? How do you help coach? Through your work, folks, to really say, let's simplify some of these elements so we can focus on the most important issues and not have so many other elements clouding, our direction.
My truthful answer to that is you need to fund the Gen Z that are building amazing things right now. Because I think a lot of what you're saying too is this demand from young people about work-life balance. And what's happening is that a lot of young people, and all generations, it's not just young people, are struggling, or they're figuring out they want to be focused on their purpose. So they are having these hobbies, or building a business here while they're working, while they're, maybe they're in a relationship, while this is happening over here. So in order to be healthy, we need to support what they want to see happen. And because we're not, I mean, trust me, I was just around all these Gen Z founders, hundreds of them. Because we're not supporting them properly, they're having to do these multiple things. Again, it's back to survival in some ways, and it's a demand from young people. It's not only young people, I think all of us too, and I definitely see an executive women who are wanting to focus on their purpose now. They want to have something that is mission aligned. They want to have something where they're helping back society or community. And because we are not in a society that fully supports that in a healthy way, we are having to dabble between multiple things constantly.
I think to your earlier point about learning from that too, that bi-directional learning, as someone who has been in a generation, like you said, that you just grind through, you just keep doing things in order, and that's what you do. It's also an opportunity for us to learn as
Mhm.
well. My son is a Gen Zer, and he was up for a promotion about a year ago. And he said, Dad, I'm going to tell them I want their promotion as long as it doesn't impact my work life balance. And my anxiety was like through the roof. Like, no, you just have to take the promotion.
Right.
But he set it up in a very thoughtful, logical way. And they went, We're so glad you said that. We just want you to do what you're doing. And I took that as a lesson like, maybe I need to rethink how I'm doing things. Maybe I'm giving too much of myself. And it was an opportunity to care appropriately. I've heard you. I'm leading to a question, I promise. I have heard you in previous conversations to talk about bidirectional and intergenerational mentorship. How do we do that? How do we set that up so that there is that bidirectional? Because I think sometimes when you are in a leadership position and you're expected to know everything, you just kind of feed downwards instead of having that bidirectional openness to say, "What can I learn from you?" How do we do that better?
Sure. So Chris, first of all, I have this week my daughter will be 21, so it's funny. I just sat down with her and we were talking about law school and all this kind of stuff, and I could not believe it came out of my mouth that one of the criteria is you have to also think about your health and this balance of life. Because I'm like you, Chris. I'm a grinder. I work hard. I still believe in working hard. There's a debate about young people debating
Absolutely.
working hard. I still believe that's very important. But anyway, yes, I completely relate. But regarding co-mentoring so let me just be clear: the mentor to mentee model is out. It's really about co-mentoring and the model of Boss Man. Yes, the model of that bi-directional two-way street. The model of Boss Man can really be modeled anywhere. But getting in, it's really like it's a relationship. Getting into a relationship
Mm,
that is two-way street. That there is that respect. That both parties are willing to be vulnerable, to willing to be respectful of each other and learn from each other. I think that's really important. And I say that vulnerable thing really importantly because, again, I have seen within our programming, some chiefs coming in thinking they have to have all the answers and unwilling to be human and unwilling to
mm.
listen to what the young person is saying. So it's like parenting. It honestly is like parenting, whether we want to admit
Yeah,
it or not.
great point.
If we're a parent that's always dictating it's a one-way street, it's not going to work. So and if we it's our job too in leadership to really listen but be in the know too, because that can create better solutions and help us honestly. But we have to be,
Hmm, hmm.
we're not blaming anybody here. My parents came from the society, like they know everything. And it's very hard for them to say that they made a mistake, right? So I think especially
Yes.
honestly, I want to give a shout out to I'm a Gen Xer. I feel like we are also real middlemen too, because we understand the old way and then we understand the young way. And honestly,
Yes.
it's a hard job. It's a really hard job.
It is. We're like the
Yes,
sandwich
yes.
generation, right? Yeah. It's a great point. I mean, Rhett, you and I and Jeremy, we all started off kind of, and I was the leader of the organization, and Rhett was very young when he started with us, but I was so incredibly impressed. And we've talked about this many times, right? So don't get crazy. But I was genuinely impressed with him. And he struck up a relationship with me, and that
Oh,
alone, I was like, I want to get to know this person. And it's been now what, six years, I think, 7 years, something. It's been forever. But I mean, we're now friends, we're colleagues, we
hmm
call each other. I think we really have we built a
hmm
friendship out of it too. But there was that bi-directional opportunity, and it was very organic. I think it's great that you're actually putting some
hmm
structure to it. I think to say you can do this anywhere, but you need to have the ability to be
yes.
receptive. I think it's a great thing because
Yes,
you
I
can
would say
learn.
structure and freedom. because there needs to be, there's also what is out is this idea of control. Nobody wants to be controlled anymore these days. I don't want to be controlled either. And so you have to create programming or a product that, yes, you give the structure, it's just like leadership. You inspire and you explain and what the expectations are, and you do the work to kind of set up the foundation, but you have to allow space for these people to build that relationship. And the other word that I really want to say that I forgot to say is the key between this relationship is being open-minded. I would say that's really important.
Mm-hmm.
I think it definitely, you've said it a couple of times, is you have to be listening and be receptive to what they're saying, even if it's not in the format that you would expect or in the channel that you would anticipate. I've got an employee that she just picks up the phone. I have another one that uses Slack. I have another one that uses text, and you have to kind of adjust your channels to kind of, again, bi-directionally to the channel where you can be heard.
You have to adjust your channels, but back to Rhett's point, you have to be a multitasker, because this person is going to, and that's hard on leadership. We're exhausted from that because we are trying to keep up with the WhatsApp, the text, the Slack, the email, because we have to cater to everybody. So that's where that multitasking comes in.
Right.
Because people are hearing things in different ways. It's just like media. It's hard.
Yeah.
A question too, as we're moving into this new era with new government, with new leadership, how are you navigating the changes to DEI, SEL? We're in the ed tech business. We can't even use those words sometimes, depending on which state we're talking to. We have to be very flexible and very aware. How are you navigating that, or do you have any tips on how to navigate that as those words are starting to become less buzzwords and almost like negatives? How do we adjust to that and still keep moving forward?
Yeah, I don't have all the answers on this one for sure, and I need your guys' help specifically. But
I'm sure.
I relate to SEL because that's EYEJ was one of the programs that's very focused on social emotional learning, and I relate to because I remember when I was just leaving, EYEJ on the day-to-day. It was just coming into the state of Ohio, and we couldn't even write certain words on contracts. I mean, it's awful, right? And then I'm obviously paying attention to what's happening now and what's happening with DEI in the corporate level. What I want to say is what DEI is about being human, right? And it's really important work that has been implemented. That's really valuable, and it's awful, honestly, what's happening. I think there's a lot of discussion about DEI moving to this idea of belonging and not using the words DEI. I think what I want to say is we need your guys' help specifically, because I think, this is the truth, and the realness is that I will be working till I'm 80 years old doing this. And sometimes a male, especially a white male, can take 5 minutes and make a change quicker than I ever could, right? And the DEI, all the things, whether it's nonprofit, politics, corporate, all of this work that has been done has saved people's lives. And so it's important, does it need to be called DEI? No, because DEI should have been implemented across departments. It shouldn't have just been an HR thing or, this segmented bucket kind of item. It's really, again, about being human. It's about being equitable. And so I think what's exciting, and that maybe, Gen Z, Rhett, you have ideas. This is where we need to listen to also young people, because this is an opportunity. When things like this happen, we have to look at it as an opportunity to get even better and more innovative for solution building in this area.
Yeah. I mean, that's where a lot of our skills are supposed to be, more so than some of the generations before, is that with this severe amount of information and technology and things that a lot of, I I grew up with the internet for sure, but I do remember a time without it. But there's so many different avenues that you can look at pursuing in different ways of approaching problems and getting over them quicker rather than trying to break through a brick wall. So yeah,
And I look at it also, again, this opportunity in my world, and I'll be honest, is that I feel like there are no rules these days in some ways. And I feel like we need to keep voicing, we need to keep communicating, because you guys know this. At the end of the day, it's always about education. I don't care if you're in corporate, nonprofit, I don't care where you are, it's always about education. And we need more people to step up to plate, express their concern or storytell. How does it impact you? Why do you care about it? I mean, to me, that's interesting. I hear everybody always talking about it all the time, but I don't hear oftentimes Caucasian males talking about how important it is. That to me is exciting. It's a new voice. It's a new way to look at things, and I think that's a huge opportunity.
And I think I know for me, I've worked in education for so long. I've always worked for women. So I think in my mind, I've assumed that there's more diversity and empowerment of women, minorities than there actually is. How do we broach that? Because full transparency, when you talk about getting to know people and empathy, you don't want to also come across as false or
Right.
you've got your unconscious biases. How do we do that as white middle-aged men, to help bridge that conversation, to do that 5-minute change from your perspective that's thoughtful, authentic, and drives that dialogue to build that empathy, that awareness. How do we do? Do you have any thoughts on
right
that?
now.
So we do
You're
it
doing
well.
it right now. All you can be is honest. And I think, to your point, I think that people, I was going to say, for the most part, people are reasonable, but I don't, there are a lot of reasonable people. And
Yeah.
I think that you just did it, Chris, to say, like, I don't want to piss you off, but I also care about this very much. And this is how this impacts me. And I'd like to learn more about this, or I feel strongly, I know that this isn't right. And I know I need to do more. What can I do? And again, I think storytelling, how does it impact your students? How does it impact people around you? Why are you even talking about it? I mean, there's something that's inside you guys right now, that's something that's not sitting right. Talk about it. Talk about it. Post about it on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Do a podcast about it. Write a story. Call your politician. I don't know, but you know what I mean? You got it. You're doing it.
Right.
You're doing it right now.
Start the conversation. Yeah.
Tag
That's
me.
great.
I will support you guys.
Absolutely.
There you go.
So Mai, how do people find you on social media and upcoming, speaker events that you're going to be doing?
The best place, if you're looking for social media, is just hop on LinkedIn. I'm at Mai Moore, MAI, last name Moore. My website is maimoore.com. Bossmian's website is bossmian.com. Mai Moore, we have a Awakening Awareness newsletter that goes out monthly that's packed with information about different speaking stuff. I'm quite busy with a lot of different speaking engagements, and if anybody out there is interested in me coming to speak or inspire or just have a conversation, I'd be happy to. I'm looking to do more speaking engagements, paid if possible, this year. We can only do what we can do. Money is important. So,
That's
right. To go to law school.
Exactly.
That matters.
That's right. That's right. Doesn't pay for itself.
But I love connecting. I love meeting people. I'm so grateful to be on this podcast. Honestly, this podcast is more interesting to me than a lot of the work with women. Honestly, this is, to me, the answer right here. No, honestly, men stepping up to the plate right now. This is huge. Huge.
We appreciate that. That's great. But to wrap this up, and then we'll let you go because we know it's late. Do you have any a couple of takeaways that you want listeners to kind of walk away with from our conversation, or anything that you wanted to kind of close out
Sure.
with?
I know that we're in a very, overwhelming, kind of sometimes chaotic and confusing world at times, but there is a lot of good happening right now. There is a lot of people building things of all
Mhm.
intergenerational generations, right? And I think that we need to support these people because whoever is building right now is literally shaping this new world that we're in. And so it's vital. And I think it's great to have these conversations. I think it's really important to be around like-minded people, but not in the way that we used to not think about it. Not about certain demographics or certain types of people, but people that are thinking the same way, who are interested in whatever consciousness leadership or having hard discussions about DEI. That being around a community is vital right now. So, and I say,
Mm.
stay optimistic. I think we have to be very strong and we have to have courage right now.
I think those are all great points. I think that's true. We can get pulled down, but I think you're right. There is a lot
A
of
lot.
good happening. We just have to make sure we keep looking for it. Not the ugly is always there, and it's
Perfect.
sometimes shinier than the good. But right, I mean, it
Yeah.
is out there. Mai, thank you so much for joining us. This was a wonderful conversation. All the best. We will definitely connect with you, and hopefully we'll get to
Thank
talk to you
you.
again in the future.
Appreciate it.
And that brings another episode of the Generational Exchange to a close. We are so grateful you joined our intergenerational conversation. We hoped it sparked some new ways of thinking about business. Thanks again to Mai Moore for joining us and starting a great conversation, and we hope we get to do that more often. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more engaging conversations across the generations. And if you'd like to be a panelist, or you have a business question that keeps you up at night, or even want to tell us what you thought of the episode, let us know in the comments or email us at feedback@thegenerationalexchange.com. Until next time, from all of us here at the Generational Exchange, thanks for listening and happy learning.